All right, to the top story of the hour, the Supreme Court has pronounced its interim order regarding pleas against the Waqf Amendment Act 2025. While the Apex Court denied to stay the Waqf Act in its entirety, it has put on hold some of the Act's provisions. Among those suspended are the provisions empowering district collectors to decide whether a property claimed as Waqf actually belongs to the government, and the stipulation that only a lawful property owner who has been practicing Islam for at least 5 years can create Waqf through a formal deed. And reading out the operative part of the order, Chief Justice of India BR Gavai clarified that the requirement of being a practicing Muslim for 5 years will take in effect only after state government frames rules on how to determine a person's adherence to Islam. Furthermore, the Supreme Court did not stay the provision allowing nomination of non-Muslims to Waqf boards, but ruled out that as far as possible, the ex officio member of the board should be Muslim. The Central Waqf Council should not consist of more than 4 non-Muslim members, and the State Waqf Board should not consist of more than 3 non-Muslim members. Now, more breaking news regarding that. NewsX has now accessed the Supreme Court's order on the Waqf Amendment Act. The order says, and I quote, "Though we are not inclined to stay the provision of Section 23 of the amended Waqf Act, we direct that as far as possible, an effort should be made to appoint the Chief Executive Officer of the board, who is the ex officio secretary from amongst the Muslim community, and we clarify that what has been reserved by us herein above is upon our prima facie consideration for purpose of examining as to whether an interim stay should be granted or not to the impugned act or the provisions contained therein. The observation made herein above will not prevent the parties from making submissions with regard to the validity of the provisions contained in the amended Waqf Act or any of the provisions therein." Now, even for that matter, we have with us my colleague Sambhav Sharma joining us on the telecast as well. Sambhav, take us through the details in terms of this order and the reaction that is coming in.
Well, the copy of the judgment in the Waqf Amendment Act, petition challenging Waqf Amendment Act and the judgment on this, the copy of the judgment of the Supreme Court, which Supreme Court passed this particular judgment around 10:30. The copy of the judgment is with NewsX, and there are many important pointers to be discussed in this particular judgment. I'll start with the first very important, in a way, observation by the top court, where the Supreme Court has declined to stay the entire Waqf Amendment Act. One thing which is to be noted here is that the entire act is not stayed by the top court of the country. And what the Supreme Court said is very important, that the Parliament enacted it within its legislative competence. This is what this has observed, and also similar kind of in a way similar arguments made in the Supreme Court by Solicitor General Tushar Mehta and Ministry of Minority Affairs also put in the Supreme Court that the entire act should not be stayed. And yes, the Supreme Court has not stayed the entire act, and holding that the Parliament acted within its legislative competence. Now, this is very important. Another very important clause, which was the bone of contention, was of 5 years of practicing Muslim, which the opposition was, in a way, petitioners were saying in the Supreme Court, including senior advocate Kapil Sibal, that this is an encroachment on the minorities' rights. Here, the Supreme Court has very clearly said that the provisions requiring the person to be practicing Muslim for 5 years before creating Waqf was stayed. Now, this particular provision has been stayed, calling it arbitrary in nature, and now directed the state governments to frame rules for it. Also, the provision empowering the district magistrate, district collector, to determine whether the property is Waqf. This particular provision has been stayed. Lot of discussions happened in the Parliament and also in the top court of the country regarding this particular provision giving collectors such kind of powers. Here, the Supreme Court has stated these powers of the collector. The court has directed, as far as the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, is concerned, the Waqf Board should, of this particular Waqf Board which is to be created by the states. So, I mean, that particular CEO, as far as possible, should be Muslim, is what is said by two-judge bench of the Supreme Court, where the Chief Justice of India, BR Gavai, and Justice KG Masi passed this particular detailed judgment, a 128-page judgment of the Supreme Court, as the Supreme Court has refused to stay the amendment permitting appointment of non-Muslims as the Waqf Board CEOs. This is another very important point. And also, the bench has emphasized on the particular property, Waqf property, that petitioners were saying in the Supreme Court there is a violation of Article 300 Clause A of the Constitution. And here the Supreme Court has emphasized, the two-judge bench emphasized in that written order that the property rights under Article 300A and the religious freedom rights under Article 25 and 26 of Indian Constitution must be balanced. Is said by the Supreme Court in its judgment on a Waqf Amendment Act, and also the Supreme Court has clarified that saying the provisions does not affect other amendments dealing with transparency and administration of properties. Now, here it is very important. In a way, Center has also said the same similar kind of thing through Solicitor General Tushar Mehta in the Supreme Court that act must not be stayed. And here the Supreme Court has not stayed the entire act, but got clarified that staying two provisions, the particular two provisions, one is of dealing with the collector and another 5 years.
All right, Sambhav, I think we're facing some audio issues from your end, but joining me on the telecast is Shadab Shams, Chairman, Waqf Board, Uttarakhand. Thank you so much for joining us on the telecast. In your perspective and in your assessment, what do you think of the Supreme Court's interim order in terms of the fact that they have talked about staying this order and several provisions that they have